Nobody asks this question during a crisis. But what if the worst thing that ever happened to you turned out to be the best? Around 300 BCE, a Phoenician merchant named Zeno had to figure that out for himself. He was moving valuable cargo across the Mediterranean when a sudden, violent storm swallowed his entire livelihood. In a single afternoon, his fortune was gone. His ships were loaded with Tyrian purple dye. In the ancient world, this was the most expensive pigment on earth, a color reserved strictly for royalty. Zeno watched a king's ransom sink to the bottom of the sea. He washed up in Athens with absolutely nothing. But instead of scrambling to rebuild, Zeno wandered into a bookshop to pass the time. He picked up a text about Socrates, asked the bookseller where he could learn to think like that, and began a decades-long pursuit that replaced his commercial ambitions with a new kind of physics for the mind. Zeno looked at the math of his former life and saw the flaw. He realized that if happiness depends on cargo ships and weather patterns, it isn't actually yours. You aren't truly living your own life. You're simply waiting for the next big storm to decide who you are. Today, we often misunderstand the philosophy Zeno founded. When we hear the word Stoic, we picture someone who represses their feelings, grits their teeth, and endures pain with a numb, emotionless stare. That is a 2 millennia old case of mistaken identity. The original Stoics experienced emotions fully. They built this philosophy as a cognitive technology to survive catastrophic loss with a clear head, not to delete their humanity. It is a system for mastering the only tool capable of navigating chaos, your own judgment. The entire system rests on one single load-bearing concept. It's called the dichotomy of control. First is the external reality, containing everything outside your direct power: the weather, the economy, other people's opinions, and how long you live. Then, the internal reality. This very narrow band strictly includes your choices, your effort, and your reactions. That is it. The suffering happens in the space between these two circles. A rainstorm doesn't inherently hurt you. Expecting sunshine and getting caught without an umbrella does. We are disturbed not by events, but by the stories we tell ourselves about those events. Drawing a ruthless boundary line between what is yours and what belongs to the universe is the only way to stop wasting energy. You stop fighting unwinnable battles against reality and start applying force exactly where it counts. Once you draw that line, Stoicism provides an internal operating system to guide your choices. It relies on 4 daily virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. This framework proved radically adaptable. In Rome, a man named Epictetus was born into slavery. Stripped of all physical autonomy, he used these virtues to realize that true freedom was entirely mental, eventually becoming one of the era's greatest teachers. At the exact same time, the most powerful man on earth was using the identical philosophy. Emperor Marcus Aurelius ran the Roman Empire while fighting wars on its borders. He handled that crushing weight by writing private journals to himself at night, focusing solely on his own character. Whether you are at the absolute bottom of the social ladder or the absolute top, the rule remains identical. True agency is never handed to you by your status or wealth. It is earned entirely through internal mastery. You don't just read about Stoicism and agree with it. It is a psychological muscle. If you want it to work when the ship goes down, you have to actively drill it before the crisis hits. One of those drills is negative visualization. You deliberately imagine losing the things you value most: your job, your health, a comfortable home. Rehearsing your response to disaster in advance replaces entitlement with genuine gratitude for what you have right now. Then there is the practice of amor fati, loving your fate. This requires shifting your mindset from merely surviving a bad hand to actively embracing obstacles. You treat the hurdle itself as the necessary raw material for your own growth. Exposing yourself to these uncomfortable mental drills every single day ensures one critical thing. When the external safety nets are suddenly stripped away by life, your mind does not collapse with them. This logic survived antiquity to birth modern clinical psychology. The Stoic approach directly inspired cognitive behavioral therapy and logotherapy, the most evidence-backed psychological frameworks used today to treat anxiety and trauma. We see this play out in the ultimate modern stress test: Nelson Mandela was sentenced to a brutal prison environment for 27 years, locked inside a concrete reality where he had absolutely zero control. While incarcerated, Mandela read the works of Marcus Aurelius. He absorbed the core values, and upon his release, he refused to seek revenge. Instead, he chose to focus his internal power on rebuilding a fractured nation. This brings us to the Galen test. The ancient physician Galen once lost his entire life's medical work in a fire. He realized his true test was whether his core identity and ability to function could survive the total destruction of his legacy. Stoicism assumes it will rain. It expects the ship to sink. By detaching your worth from the storm, you reclaim the power to decide what happens next.